Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Core 3 webinar, week 14. This is a recorded webinar this week instead of a live webinar because we have testing at Central, so I will not be able to go live with you guys this week. So this week you're going to do like you normally do. You would just go open a new tab, and hopefully you're already in there because you're watching this. You're going to go into Quarter 2, week 14, click on the webinar and discussion page, read through that discussion prompt within Schoology and respond. So let's go ahead and look at that. So you'll respond to this discussion, okay? And what you're going to do is pause this video while you're doing that. Once you have finished recording your response, you'll come back, play the rest of this video, and you will learn how to find the best price of that car, and you will learn some strategies that you could do. So what I want you to do is then watch this. After you've learned those strategies and you've come up with some ideas, then I want you to go back to the discussion, and this time you'll go ahead and post to your own a reflection of what you learned or how you could have done it better. You can even go to somebody else's prompt and comment on theirs just like you normally would. But I definitely want you to go back in after you've watched this webinar and reflect on what you have learned from the webinar. So go ahead and do that now. Pause and fill out that discussion. Okay, so if you're coming back, hopefully that means that you have filled out your discussion. And if we look at our objectives, we're going to create equations to represent a contextual scenario, and we're going to analyze our solutions to a contextual problem. So this is considered a contextual problem. And by creating equations, we're actually just going to be looking at some constraints related to inequalities, since you guys have been working on inequalities. Okay, so here's our discussion. You want a car that is less than $20,000. So right there, you should be thinking to yourself, oh, that's a constraint. It's less than $20,000 after a 5% sales tax is added. So here's all the prices, and we have to consider a 5% sales tax. You also want fuel costs to be under $2,000, so less than $2,000. And you plan to drive 10,000 city miles next year. You estimate that you will pay about $4 per every gallon of gas. And you want to figure out which car best meets your needs. So there's many ways to do this. You could just look at all these prices, look at all this miles per gallon, and you could eliminate and come up with what you think would meet these constraints. You could try to write some constraints, or you can just try to manually figure this out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a mix. I'm going to show you guys how to guess and check and try to figure out how these cars can meet your needs. So what I'm going to do is pull up a calculator here. We'll need this. So let's first figure out part one. Let's see. How can we find a car that is less than $20,000 after a 5% sales tax has been added? Okay. So we have all these prices. How do we figure out what the cost would be with a 5% sales tax? So let's define some variables. Whenever we're dealing contextually, it's good to define variables. So let's go ahead and say that X, we'll use X first, is the price of the car. Okay. So we know that if we take the price of the car and we add 5% sales tax to that, we'll get our total cost. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the price of the car times 105%, because I want 100%, which is the 19,500 on this first one, plus a 5%. So I'm getting 1.05, which represents 105%. So if I took 19,500, for example, so let's do that, 19,500, and I multiplied that by 1.05, which is 105% written as a decimal, and I hit enter, I get 20,475. Okay, so what that did is it took the 19,500 and I added to that a 5% tax on this, 19,500 times 5%. And I can simplify that by just typing in 1.05. Now I know that that needs to be less than $20,000, right? It doesn't say or equal to, it just says has to be less than. So there's a constraint. Okay, so I can figure out by doing that, well, that 19, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it, like I said, a mixture. I'm going to do a little bit of elimination. We'll maybe practice writing some constraints. So there's a way to write a constraint. All these sales prices can become X, and I can plug this in, and I can see if it's less than 20,000. Well, this one we can eliminate right away. It is not. So anything that is 19.5 or older, over, I know is going to be too high, right? It's not going to meet my price. So I can eliminate these right off the bat. Okay. Maybe I need to check the 19,250 as well. So I could check that because that gets a little bit lower. So 19,250 times the 1.05. And I get up, that's over as well. So should have maybe started a little bit lower. So let's keep going down. Let's check our 19,000, see how that works. So 19,000 times 1.05, and I'm just eliminating here. And that's under. So this is okay. That means these three will be okay. So I've right away eliminated 4 cars based on this constraint. Okay? All right, so let's look at our second constraint. It says I want fuel costs to be under $2,000. So let's go ahead and define another variable. So let's have y be equal to the number of gallons that I'm going to drive, because I'm doing this, I could say it's fuel costs, but my equation is going to be rather complicated, and I'm going to make it a little bit simple. In order to figure out my fuel costs, I need to know how many gallons of gas I will use, because the cost of my gas, it says right here, is $4 per gallon. So how many gallons am I going to use? That's an unknown. I need to know that. So let's say that y is equal to the number of gallons that I would use. And again, I could make this more complicated, but sometimes if we can solve things simply, it maybe makes a little more sense. So we'll say that y is the number of gallons of gas I'm going to use. Well, I know that if I take $4 times the number of gallons I'm going to use, it has to be less than, it says right here, $2,000, right? So it has to be less than $2,000. One thing I didn't do in the top equation that would have made my life easier, and I'm going to do it in the bottom equation, but let me just show you. So say I move this down. In this top equation, had I solved for x, so say I had done this, I had divided both sides by the 1.05, and I divided 20,000 by 1.05, because x is our price, right? X is the price of the car. I would have gotten x is less than, and 20,000 divided by that, and I did it in advance, is 19,047 and 62 cents. So with that knowledge, I could have gone through right away and eliminated everything that was greater than that amount. So that would have been a quick way to do that. Okay, and I can do something similar to that with y. So let's go ahead and divide both sides by 4. Make our life a little simpler here too. So let's divide by 4, divide by 4. So I'm just solving for y. These cancel, and y is going to be less than 500. Okay, so what does that mean, that 500? So that 500 is related to y, and remember that we defined y as the number of gallons of gas. So that means the number of gallons of gas that we use has to be less than 500. Okay, so we have one more step in this to figure out how many gallons of gas that we might use. So we can say that y, to find y, the number of gallons of gas, we would need to take that 10,000 miles that we drive every year, and we would need to divide it by how many miles per gallon each car gets. Okay, and that is really how we're figuring out our y. So what we can do is we can look at some that get very low mileages, like the 19 or the 14 or the 21, and we can get a benchmark, and then we can start to eliminate. So let's go within the middle. Let's try with the 21 and see how that works. So if we take 10,000 and we divide that by 21, we end up with 476, and that is less than 500. So that 21 is okay. So maybe if we went a little bit lower, so we could try the 19. Let's go ahead and try the 19. So we could do 10,000 divided by 19. And this is just how I'm thinking. If I was you, maybe just try some elimination. Oh, it looks like that 19 is too low. That's not going to work, which means that the 14 is also not going to work. The 21 was okay and the 27 was okay. So in the end, we have narrowed it down by process of elimination to either model G or model H. And if you look at these, model H is more expensive. It gets less miles to the gallon than model G. So I think that in the end, by process of elimination, I would choose model G. That would be the final answer for me. So that's one way you can figure out inequalities. Like I said, you can also practice writing constraints, graphing them, seeing which one fits inside the graph, which you will do in your linear programming unit as well. All right, and that concludes our webinar for week 14. I will see you all next week for a live webinar, and we can answer any questions that you might have on this at that time.